Hello and welcome to the Uncrewed Systems Virtual Conference, enabling artificial intelligence, safety certification, and MOSA in military autonomous platforms. My name is John McHale, EVP and Group Editorial Director with Military Embedded Systems, the SOSA Special Edition, and the FACE Special Edition. And I'm also host for today's event. To learn more about Military Embedded Systems, please visit militaryembedded.com. The Uncrewed Systems Virtual Conference is designed to drive awareness and thought leadership around embedded electronics technology for autonomous systems. From AI to signal processing to avionics safety certification. It also examines strategies for applying a modular open systems approach or MOSA in these designs. Today's event has sessions this afternoon on autonomous ISR payloads, leveraging AI and commercial technology for actionable intelligence, navigating safety certification in UAS platforms, and leveraging MOSA strategies for autonomous systems. Our keynote session, which we're going to start in just a few moments, is titled Accelerating Dual Use Technology for the Warfighter, and is hosted by Dawn Zoldi, Colonel, U.S. Air Force retired, and founder and CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and host of the Dawn of Jones podcast. During the keynote session, she will chat with Lt Col Thomas Meagher, U.S. Air Force Prime Division Chief for AFWERX, where he is responsible for accelerating development and transition of emerging dual-use technologies for the Department of the Air Force. Now, before I turn it over to Dawn, I have some housekeeping items to go over. This and all Open Systems Media virtual events are copyrighted and may not be recorded or used in any way without the express written consent of Open Systems Media. The keynote session will consume about 40 to 45 minutes, leaving the remaining time for the question and answer session. Now, some of you might notice that our console has a new look and feel for 2023, so let me show you around. You'll find on the right-hand side an area where you can enter your questions in real time. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the session while the question is still fresh in your mind. We'll address as many questions as we can during the closing Q&A portion. If you have a question for Dawn or Tom, please note so at the beginning of your question, or I will offer it to both of them. If you have a question pertaining to the event operation itself, one of our technicians will get back to you during the session. Please note that as much as we'd like to, we may not get to all your questions today. In that case, someone may get back to you after the event with more information. Now, across the way on the left-hand side, there's a resources section, and that's where you can find the slides being presented today. Below that, you can view today's speaker information. Two more features that we're really excited about. Your console is now customizable insofar as you're able to manipulate all these widgets, Q&A, resources, and presenters for your ideal viewing experience. Expand them to get a closer look, or close them to have the presentation window automatically resize around them. For maximum screen size, close them all, and or utilize the full screen control in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation window. To bring them back, simply click on the buttons in the bottom middle dock. In an effort to make our webcast more accessible this year, we have added closed captioning capabilities in nearly a dozen languages, including English. So to enable this functionality, simply click on CC in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation window and select your language of choice for the drop-down menu. This session and event will be archived online at the same URL you used to join today's live session and be available within 48 hours. Once up, it'll be available for at least 1 year. Now I will turn it over to our keynote host, Dawn Zoldi. Dawn, take it away.
Thanks so much, John. Hey, everybody out there. Great to see you. Dawn Zoldi here, as John said, Colonel, retired United States Air Force, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and some of you may know me as the Dawn of Drones because I host that podcast and a couple others. I'm so excited to be talking today with Lt Col Thomas Meagher from AFWERX. So welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks for having me, Don. Excited to be here to talk about what we have going on. Excited to answer the questions and see what's out there and what folks want to hear.
Awesome. And just a reminder, I know John already said it, but we are live. So if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A and I'll try to field them as we go. But before we get into the meat of this presentation, I'd love, Tom, if you could also give your 30-second elevator speech bio, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So Tom Meagher, been in the Air Force almost 19 years this summer. Background in operations, so I was B-52 pilot for quite a while. Went into test pilot school, did tests on bombers, small aircraft, and all in between for quite a time. Did some program management time for a little bit in the Air Force. Came out here in the DC region and been with AFWERX for almost 2 years. Incredibly exciting opportunity to engage with industry and see what all is out there in the emerging tech sector and how we can bring it in the Air Force. So incredibly great experience so far. Happy to continue the mission and move forward.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure everybody out on this net knows what dual use technologies are, but Tom, could you just very briefly, just to be sure we level the playing field, explain what a dual use technology is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, essentially there are a significant amount of things that are out on the commercial market that have been developed. If you look at the kind of history of research and development spending. We've seen a large shift over the last 5-6 decades where you had a significant amount, originally back in the 50s, 60s, where it's all government-funded research and development, and that has shifted significantly, where a significant amount of dollars on the research and development side are all in the commercial space. And so how we think about dual use is where are those technologies that have some overlapping capabilities, how the government could use them as well. And so finding those synergies, that's really dual use. It's not just a specific only commercial market, but there is a government use, and there's lots of overlap on these tech sectors. And so finding those overlaps is really where we sit as an organization to try to move them in.
Awesome. I think around that same time frame you mentioned in the 1950s is when Congress also passed a technology transfer statute, which is really all about the federal laboratories, not just within the DoD, but the whole federal government, working with industry to bring technologies on board, right? Like you said, to kind of get out of that business and leverage what the commercial sector is doing, and also then develop it further, give it back to industry to commercialize, and then it's a win-win for our economy and the DoD all at the same time. So how does AFWERX exactly fit in that paradigm? In other words, I think many folks are familiar with the Defense Innovation Unit that has some very specific targeted programs that, like, for example, the Blue UAS program, where at least initially they were looking to commercial off-the-shelf technologies that already existed and either bringing them directly on board or having them get tweaked slightly for military purposes. How do you do it at AFWERX?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important. We'll talk a lot today about kind of how DIU fits in, what's kind of the AFWERX model, where's kind of our sphere of influence and scope. And I think the first big one is that, so AFWERX executes the SBIRS, that are Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs for the entire Department of the Air Force. So that's both Air Force and Space Force. So we include both of those in there.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And so as part of that, so example, the scope of that, it's about $1 billion per year. That's in that, just those funding lines. And so that covers mission sets and emerging tech across the entire Department of the Air Force. So it's very, very broad, which means we're going out and we're executing that program. We're also being the connectors between you, the end users that need that, your labs that are help developing some of this technology with the companies, your program offices that will eventually catch that sort of technology. So the scope is very, very broad. And as such, we capture not only what the emerging tech needs are for the entire department, and then help kind of shape and scope those solicitations. And we do, 3 different methods of doing that. So we've got certainly what has become very popular, and in fact, in the recent congressional authorization, all government agencies go do the open topic. And so that's, hey, industry has ideas. We, as the government, might not have thought of what the solution set is or the problem. That's industry saying, here's my idea, here's how I can possibly solve a defense need, and bring that into us, and we can evaluate that and bring in new companies and new ideas of solving problems. We also have a section called just specific topic, but just like it sounds, hey, government has an issue. They know what the exact problem is. They don't know what the solution is, but they have a very focused problem set that they have. Industry bring us the stuff to help answer that. And then the third one is the supplemental funding program. So the strategic funding increase and tactical funding increase. And that's been a really exciting program that we've done only over the last few years. So we worked with the Small Business Administration to get higher thresholds for what funding we could utilize. And it incentivizes matching funding from either the commercial sector. So say a company is getting commercial investment for developing a specific technology. You can provide matching SBIR dollars, so government dollars, to help really accelerate that effort. It could also be matching on the government side as well from a program office or something like that. So that's really the key difference. So we have AFWERX, we have the SBIR program, and then we'll talk a little bit later on the prime programs, which has research and development, certain type of funding. So not necessarily SBIR dollars. And DIU, for that matter, they could use small business companies, but they have a separate funding line, research development type funding, that they can kind of go after the problem sets that their customers and people within the department have needs for, to go find those solutions.
I want to get to the primes here in a minute and kind of your structure. But before I do that, there's an excellent question out there that I want to address. The DoD and the Air Force are huge entities, right? You just said you're juggling $1 billion budget for some of these very wide-ranging topics. How do companies new to the defense community navigate this market? So I guess that's the first question. You said Cybersitter. Is there a website people should be scanning on a daily basis to see where these, open topics are listed, or, how as a practical matter do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You just listed a huge challenge. If I'm new to the government, how do I even navigate this maze of everything that's out there? So very simply, we certainly keep all kind of up-to-date information on AFWERX.com. Very simple. Hey, it has fundamentals of, if you've never heard of any of the programs whatsoever, what are the programs that we have? It explains kind of the Cybersitter process and the kind of rules and how do you qualify, but more importantly, links to those pages that are kind of the definitive answers. So in this case, it's the overall Department of Defense Cybersitter program, and so eventually it links to how do you actually go in and how do I submit to those solicitations. So it provides avenues to get where do I find the current open one. So for example, you can go through there and we've got an open direct to phase 2 type solicitation that's on there right now. It's open through early May. So we try to keep that information up to date. We also host through the website. You can see we host, and then we keep them saved of weekly webinars about what's going on in AFWERX, especially on the Cybersitter side, to say, because we know we're catching new companies every single solicitation, which are pretty regular, about every 4 months. And so we provide that information. Here's how you navigate the process, and then we save all that stuff so you can go back and reference it about any of the programs that are involved.
Well, that transparency is pretty incredible, because I would think as a kind of a new entrant into this market, having those kind of resources would be really, really helpful. Second follow-on question from the audience. Is one of the biggest hurdles just finding where to go in the Air Force and DoD? You have this incredible website. It links back to the DoD's Cybersitter website, but don't you sometimes need to have, I think the term is a sponsor for a particular project? Do you need to already have connections within the Air Force or DoD that you're aligned with to really be successful here?
Yeah. So that is, so first of all, you don't have to have those connections. We want to try to help build them, but it certainly is a huge hurdle to overcome. And so some of our programs are structured that way. So for example, within the small business Cybersitter things, we have phase 1s. Think of that as like small, very low barrier to entry, get in small contracts. The intent of that one is really get the idea in and then do the connection pieces. So we provide collider events to match up with potential customers so they can actually go and help find those, because that is daunting. If you are outside of the Department of Defense, just the monstrosity of how many people are in there, and also all the different areas that you could be a customer is a challenge. So we try to deliberately try to make those connections and build out those networks and help those companies build out those networks. At the end of the day, even I don't know every single one that is to work on a specific tech area, but finding those spots is certainly in our job jar. So
yeah,
I'll put a couple on there. Yeah,
Tom, I was just going to say, like, I was in the Air Force like you, and there's definitely a lot you don't know, right? Like, I didn't even learn about a lot of these federal labs and tech transfer until I was really a very senior colonel and kind of transitioning into my civil service position with the Secretary of the Air Force. So, this is not even common knowledge for people on the inside, honestly, unless it's a place where you dwell every day. I didn't mean to cut you off. You were continuing.
Oh, I forgot what it was. That's okay. We'll move on.
That's all right. Well, it's okay, because I wanted to transition to talk about the structure that you've superimposed as AFWERX, and what are these primes? I think we have a slide to pop up to kind of give a good visual of what we're talking about here. If you could walk us through that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of shows what are kind of inside the bubble on the website. What are kind of the 3 main areas that we have within AFWERX? So I talked a lot about AF Ventures. So that is they're executing the Cybersitter portfolio. They're engaging with the investment community. That's what that section is. Below that, you have Sparks. That's kind of our talent-focused part of the organization. So, and that was kind of the genesis of our organization a while back, was how do we instill innovation culture and capture the not only the ideas, but also provide, resources and education of how you actually scale an idea within the Department of the Air Force itself. So that AFWERX Spark piece is not only the innovation culture piece, not only education piece, and also kind of we've set up programs to get people to go out from the Air Force and go into other industries and communities that they would not have otherwise done. So certainly a big success on that was the Defense Ventures Fellowship. We take folks from part of the Air Force and we go send them out, whether it's to a VC community, whether it's to a emerging tech startup, just to see a completely different perspective that they would otherwise not be maybe able to see, and bring some of those mindsets possibly back in how they're influencing stuff within the.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tom, when I was at the Air Force Academy, the cadets created a kind of a mini Spark there at the Academy, and it's almost like Shark Tank, right? It's just like bring us your cool ideas. And we'll sort through those and see if there's a good fit for what we're trying to do.
We kind of hit on it. So people ask us about, so spark cells are throughout the entire Air Force, even worldwide. And think of those as like your base level, the wing commander, the person who's in charge of all those units, that's theirs to help grow and foster how they see fit to be able to capture all those ideas from all their airmen and guardians that have the good ideas. They just don't know how do they trickle those things up. So they can be as simple as just a few folks, all the way to people that are help managing cyber center contracts and figuring out how they can actually provide solutions within their local places. So those are great. We provide, so AFWERX as the bigger organization provides some of the resourcing, the education for each of those individual cells to go execute and make it what they need to be for their.
And can outside people, obviously the cadets was a little bit insular because I think it was limited to the people at the Air Force Academy. But, if I'm living in New Jersey, say by Joint Base, as I think it's called McGuire-Dix, I'm not sure. And they have a Spark cell and I'm an entrepreneur. Is there a way I can plug into that?
So that's a really good question because well, I can't answer for every individual base.
Right.
There should be how we handle it as AFWERX. So we have sites kind of throughout the country. We've started to kind of grow those out to be kind of front doors of, hey, you just have something. For example, in Austin, the Capitol Factory, where some of the Army Applications Lab, DIU has some folks out there. That's a place like somebody can just walk in the front door and talk to an actual person and say, hey, how do I engage in your ecosystem? I can't necessarily answer that at the base level because it really depends on how those bases have structured their program to pitch their ideas. What we do,
that's a great point that you have a couple of storefronts. So I was actually at the Capitol Factory in Austin last year when I went to the PX4 Developer Summit. They had an evening event in that building, and as we were walking out, I'm like, oh look, that's the AFWERX area right there in the lobby, right by the front door, as you said. What are the other locations where you have some of these kind of physical presences for people to just walk in the front door, if you will?
Yeah, so that was certainly the primary one that we've stood. We have a lot of people out where I'm out in the National Capital Region, and as of last week, we finally got back into a space where we kind of do that. So we're starting to stand up that capability here out in DC. We have a lot of folks that run certainly the Cyber Center program out in Dayton, Ohio, right, Pat Air Force Base. So trying to build it out. We actually have a small space out in Pittsburgh, kind of around that tech hub, where a couple of folks set up to try to build out these front doors.
Is there one in Vegas?
So there is still a place in Vegas that we've got right now with a couple of folks out there. So we're seeing where we need to be and where the tech and growth is, and assessing where those spots need to go.
Very cool. So tell us about Prime. So we talked about ventures, we talked about Spark, but a lot of people have heard about this Prime. Maybe they've read about it, but what exactly is AFWERX Prime, and is it subdivided?
Yeah. So this is the part, and this is where I sit within the organization, is how do we look at very specific tech sectors that maybe can provide a DoD to where's there a large investment on the commercial side that maybe we haven't tapped into, or maybe we can help that industry along through how we structure it. Is how can we reduce technical regulatory and some financial risk in those sectors. I mean, those are the big hurdles, especially on the commercial side,
Right.
as somebody's developing things out. So there's always good government resources and expertise we can provide in those areas. So how can we, foster those markets that are starting to show up, and then figure out transition path over to capability as the technology matures and pans out. So we'll certainly talk about the main first program that we did that on was Agility Prime, which is on hybrid and electric vehicles out in the commercial space, and how can we utilize those? Some unmanned, some piloted. It's been really exciting to see what that industry has been able to do, and as they continue to get closer to kind of commercial market.
Let's talk about that let's dwell on that for a second, because the theme of this keynote is dual use technologies, and we've all been watching, I think, companies like Joby, which just kind of rung the bell there at the New York Stock Exchange as a result of working with you, quite frankly, and Beta Technologies, and a handful of others, plus the components, right, that fit into these aircraft, whether it's parachutes or maybe avionics companies and whatnot, to get that full package. Explain how this eVTOL and advanced air mobility, if you will, a group of folks that you've been working with. Explain how that crosses over to the commercial sector, because we're seeing a lot of overlap, and how, as a practical matter, is that working? Like you guys, I feel like Beta Technologies, it was kind of a little bit under the radar, but they were the very first ever to get a military aircraft certification for their eVTOL. And how does that then relate to the commercial side and the FAA and what we're seing over there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We certainly try to publicize of how it works and where we fit in there. So I mentioned one of the things that we're trying to do is reduce regulatory risk, and it's really important that. So we with a handful of those companies, I think we've got 5 or 6 that have gone through the airworthiness side for their prototypes. So that we can utilize them on the government side, and what that's doing is it's really informed. So we're going on and we're actually going through those, the airworthiness stuff on the DoD side to identify certain risk areas for improvement on the tech side, and that's helping inform the FAA. So the FAA will set their own certification standards for these vehicles, and they have different structures of how they have to do it. So it's really important that by us saying we made it airworthy, the FAA doesn't necessarily just take that, but what it is doing, this is outstanding, is we've brought the FAA teams in to integrate with us. Weekly, we're talking to the FAA folks that are figuring out how to go certify these advanced air mobility vehicles, and providing all those airworthiness lessons learned, all the testing lessons learned that we've seen. And that's helping shape not only their understanding of where the technology is, where the risk areas are, as they set their certification standards, which otherwise they may not always get that level of access information sharing to help them do it. So by being able to share that within the government, it helps not only the FAA figure out the right way to safely certify these and have the interests of the general public in mind, but also helps the companies. It provides them another avenue, another government partner that can help talk government to government between those other interagency players of hey, here's what we're seeing, here's how we think you can make strides towards the certification path. Because at the end of the day, how we structure the program, we had couple strategic goals in mind. One is foster this commercial industry, because long term there is value in on the government side. And so that's supporting things of how do they get to that FAA civil certification? How do we provide some government resources they can test out? They can do things that maybe they wouldn't be able to do with their normal civil approvals that really help them get to that end game. And then the second was, how do we get some of these things transitioned over to DoD capabilities? And it's been great in this program as we brought in, the other services to learn about these type of vehicles and how they could utilize them. So that's kind of how the relationship works. It's been really great to kind of help organisms be a forcing function on the interagency side, because they need to get those commercial certification paths to be successful as a business long term.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, the FAA is all about safety, and the fact that you can work with these companies in a safe space with some funding to build out that safety case and also inform the regulations is really key. I think that's the win-win of what you're doing. So we talked about the eVTOL a little bit, the advanced air mobility. What are some of the other lines of effort that right now you have ongoing as part of Prime?
Yeah, so Prime. So we announced it. I guess it's probably about 6 months ago. Of hey, we're looking at to kind of expand this model out to kind of align with other needs of the Air Force and Space Force. So even before that. So the other one that we on the space side, so we announced Orbital Prime. So that was focused on, hey, there's a significant amount of commercial investment on the space side. And Orbital Prime specifically was looking at was the on-orbit servicing and manufacturing capabilities with a near-term kind of use case of active debris remediation. So how do we get how do we take care of space junk? There's a lot of stuff going up there. How do we start to take care of that? And there's a lot of investment on the commercial side that the Space Force, as they look for their model of how they handle that sort of thing, can morph as more commercial companies develop their capabilities out. Maybe that's a service that the Space Force could purchase, and so fostering that commercial market is really important. So that was the first one. They've as of recently they've had the direct phase 2s that have closed. They've got a number of different small businesses that are participating in that with future efforts upcoming. The other ones that we on the Air Force side was we announced, hey, we want to start to get engaged on the autonomy side. There's certainly a significant interest on increased autonomy capabilities within the Department of the Air Force. I mean, certainly saw the announcement recently from leadership on the fiscal year 24 budget of a significant interest on collaborative combat aircraft. So our role in that is how do we go out and almost tech scout and find the companies that can help feed into that that larger ecosystem and pipeline for autonomy capabilities within the Department of the Air Force. So we're excited to start to shape that with the rest of the Air Force and the program offices and the programs that are going to be standing up to take care of those things. So we can, like I said, that's not just an AFWERX thing. That's a whole of the Air Force capture what industry has to bring them into the fold.
Very cool. So it was agility, orbital, and autonomy primes are floating around out there. I want to ask this question that was from the audience. So in these various efforts, how does AFWERX address modular open systems, that approach MOSA in these various primes?
Yeah, exactly. Also, I'll say not only just the primes, but the overall portfolio in general. So you have all the small business thing, which is huge, and so it varies depending on what stage they're at. You have some folks that are just doing kind of feasibility of an idea in an early stage and lower TRLs, where they're just trying to demonstrate the feasibility. As you get to kind of the higher TRLs.
And by the way, everybody, I'm sure you know this, it's technical readiness level. It's the level of kind of where you are in the ability to actually, no kidding, launch. Yeah.
So I'm usually pretty good at avoiding the acronym soup. I failed horribly right there. So I apologize. Thank you for correcting me, Hunter, on that one. So early stage where the readiness is, kind of figure out the feasibility of an idea, as opposed to a large portfolio of all those small business products. It starts to become, those sort of things can be areas that, as they learn more about what their future kind of program requirements are, incorporating like, how do I adapt my product to the modular open systems architectures and standards? That can be part of some of those SBIR contracts. That is actually one very good use of, if I've got a commercial product that's out there, I know there's some government requirements to actually get it into the systems, and one of them is maybe adapting it to whatever the government standards has been. That's a perfect example of how you would utilize some of those contracts to open up that transition path into government programs. So that's that's a very broad one. On some of the Prime program, for example, while for Agility Prime, it was really important for the early stages of that program that we didn't actually impose hard requirements on those companies. We wanted to foster what their commercial development was. What we've found is that as that has moved along, some of those companies have been more and more interested in, all right, what sort of things could possibly enable more lines of business in the future. And that's when we start to fold in, hey, here's a start to considerations for your product development, most of being one of them for sure. Increase cybersecurity on how you do your connections and your software would be others. So we can start to provide that information so they can, make a decision as they go down to selling to the government of, hey, here's the additional protections we have to put in place. Here's the additional things to consider so that it can more easily fold into certifiable and eventual capability for the DoD. So that's kind of how we're approaching that a little bit on the MOSA standards as well. So it depends where on the life cycle it is.
So it may not be hard baked into a requirement, but if I was a company applying, and I imagine if I had MOSA as part of my proposal, it might give me a leg up, if not in actually obtaining some kind of an in with the Air Force or the DoD. But certainly as you mature the program or throughout the program, it's going to give you a leg up, not only in becoming a program of record, but also on the commercial side. I mean, the reality is, and I think you would agree this because you're watching, you've got a toe in both lakes, if you will. You're looking at the commercial and the DoD and everything you do, Tom. We're seeing a push for this on the commercial side because, if everything is stovepiped, and the way technology keeps so rapidly increasing, you're going to get left behind at some point. It's going to get too expensive for people. And we've seen a lot of open standards, especially on the software side, that are really just making technology soar. So really cool. We do have an excellent question out there. I'm gonna ask it here in a second, Edmund H. I see you, and we're gonna talk about this. But I wanna go to the next slide and hit some of the success stories because not everybody gets in, but those that do, as you mentioned, they're working with the FAA, they're getting some funding, they're doing some great things. And so walk us through what we see here.
Yeah, so what the kind of walking what this kind of shows is that, we've been supporting the companies certainly on their product development and maturing that piece on the commercial side. But on the Air Force side, we've also had a path of figuring out how do we train, utilize, operate these vehicles. So we've kind of done a crawl, walk, run phase throughout this. So, back in December 2021, that was the first time that we actually had one of our operators remotely operating an eVTOL. And as part of that, we've got a detachment, Detachment 62 with Air Education and Training Command. So that's the folks that do our training for the Air Force, and they develop curriculum and how you're going to train new operators. So we partner with them to help to develop these things. And it benefits not only the companies of how you're going to train new people, but also the Air Force of how we would train, as this is a new class of vehicle. So that's the first time we did that. We actually got one of our folks went through some initial training and did some remote operations. So from there, we went out and learned how do we get some of our initial test pilots and start evaluating this. So upper right, March of 2022, that was the first Air Force test pilot that was out. That's in beta specifically to go just do qualitative evaluation up on the aircraft, do some initial learning, help inform some of the future curriculum development as we get more pilots in there later on. Which was great for us. Lots of learning on both sides, industry and Air Force side. And this was great. So you saw Air Force March 2022. We did that. Like I said, we've been looking to pull in the other services. So the Army has been certainly significantly interested. I mean, if you look at different vertical lift capabilities, the Army has a lot of that type of capability within the DoD. So they were certainly interested in learning about this new emerging advanced air mobility type capability. So at bottom left, July 2022, this was a great story in that we shared all of our kind of approvals, airworthiness reviews, so the Army didn't have to go redo all that stuff. And
wow.
That helped them,
I mean, that right there, it's like, oh, that's a miracle. It's like cross service collaboration. Come on.
It is. And we've even expanded that out to, other agencies as well. Like get folks to start using some of the information. We don't stovepipe, do it over and over again. That's just how we kill ourselves as a government. So that was the first Army soldier that was out there evaluating beta out in July of last year. And then we continued to go down the path of, training operators for different backgrounds. So we had, a pilot background, enlisted aviator out there. So we had 4 people that we had qualified for doing remote operations. That's down into Duke Field and Eglin Air Force Base area down there in November. And actually, we've since then big news on our side is that we're continuing to go out and increase the number of kind of pilot training prep for some of our initial, test cadre as we get more of the other vehicles on Air Force bases later on this year, to really start evaluating and putting through the paces. A significant amount of learning both for us of how a new type of electric and hybrid vehicle we'd operate that and what goes in the day-to-day, because that's very different. But also, like you mentioned earlier, provide some of the information and confidence back to the companies, the FAA, the general public on, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what we're seeing on this area. So that really stuff it's about. We're continue this year will be really big for us as we, like I mentioned, continue out those pilot operations with some of the other vehicles that are out there.
Well, that's great. I want to weave this question in because it's a great one. So we see in these pictures that we just had, beta. We know Joby's been out there doing great things with you guys. In terms of, this is the question from Edmund, in terms of uncrewed vehicles, small U.S. drone providers' perspective and tackling the DoD market, what suggestions would you make about the wrong way of building recognition, relationships, and business bases within the DoD? So again, we had some successful companies on the eVTOL side. They made their way in. Are there any thoughts you have, Tom, on maybe some horror stories or like, all right, this is definitely not what you want to do because we've seen some really bad ideas or really bad approaches?
What not to do? I think there's certainly. I mean, it's a balance because you have just like on a commercial company has to do that business development side and really get the interest of certainly the investment community, and what's out there. It's important certainly when we're dealing with the government side is having the information to kind of back it up. That will go a long way. You'll have approaches and capabilities that you want to develop and sell. The challenge is being blind. This is a challenge of what are the defense needs. So maybe the stuff you have is maybe hasn't been completely fleshed out and is a little immature. Bridging that fine line of interest and excitement on the DoD side, but not overselling too much where eventually the DoD may lose interest if you can't get to that delivery part. So that's one example. Don, I'm really interested to hear kind of your perspective on that as well.
I think you pinged on something that's important, that TRL level. If you're working with the DoD, NASA, really anybody, and they're putting out a call for something very specific, and you don't even have a prototype, you've got like a paper napkin idea, it's probably not going to cut it, is my thinking, right? So like you said, having a little bit of maturity in your thinking and in your design and what you're trying to do, I think is really key. And I've seen some people fall flat. They just have, I have a great idea. And then it's just like, why did you even apply? They're looking for kind of TRL 5 or 6. And then, and you're like a TRL 0 or -1 at this point, right? I think the other thing that I've seen is, I think that's one of the main things, honestly, that I've seen. The other one is, hey, I'll do whatever you need. In other words, a call goes out and like you said, if you're putting out kind of a broad area announcement or something generic, like we kind of want your ideas. If you come to the Air Force or DoD and say, hey, we can do anything, that's not helpful or useful to people, I think. So that's some of the feedback I've gotten from other folks that are kind of in your world, Tom, and some of the things I've seen working with some clients, that those are definitely, I think, 2 big stumbling blocks for people.
I'll add kind of a positive note. What I tell companies as well, and what people, evaluators and things people want to see is how does what they're doing, tie to solve an eventual operational challenge or problem. That's what people really care about.
So the value proposition.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah. Like, it's like, and I'm laughing because so many people are out there, they've got some solution, but they don't know what problem they're trying to solve. Or in your case, especially if you put out a specific problem to be solved, if they cannot make that connection, like I've got this cool widget over here, it's modular, open, well, that's great. But like, how does that solve what we're trying to to solve on our side. So
Yeah.
I think making those connections, it's a little bit about advocacy, honestly.
Yes.
And yeah, walking that fine line. Great question out here from Donna. Donna Y is asking, are you also collaborating with DARPA on OPAs?
So I saw this question come in, and I have to ask Donna, what does OPA stand for? So we collaborate with DARPA on a number of things, but I'm not familiar specifically with that term. So Donna, if you know, or if Donna, if you can back on that would help.
I'm going to, it's an open, let me see, OPA.
Well,
I
you
think
look
it's
at
part of I think they meant OTA, other transaction authorities, but I could be wrong. Let's see, OPA.
Well, so we're looking for that. I'll talk about what things we are collaborating with DARPA on that we're excited about. So, some of that effort that we do is, I'll give you examples on not only the VTOL aspect that we did with the vertical takeoff and landing aspect that we did with Agility Prime. So there's certainly crosstalk. As DARPA, I think they recently had another solicitation out for some advanced VTOL capabilities, as well as future technologies that will support high-speed vertical takeoff and landing. We certainly collaborate with some of those teams and their leads to see. So we provide just information sharing on what are you guys seeing from a tech industrial base that maybe we could help catch or crosstalk. There's just crosstalk pollination there between the organizations. Same thing on the autonomy. So as we went to go, start up some of our autonomy efforts, part of that is just internal government research. Like not only like what you do on the outside for market research for who's going to be customer, we did that same thing on the inside of who was working on what within the DR already. And that helped inform us on not only just kind of business intelligence for what capabilities were already out there, but also what stuff we didn't want to just duplicate or overlap. That's certainly a problem sometimes with the large Department of Defense. So we did some of that. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Don.
Oh, no. I was going to say it's, DARPA is completely external to you. And it sounds like you're doing a great job of kind of cross-leveling the research that you're finding, like the Army example you gave, and also seeing what other needs are out there. And to the extent there's a synergy working together. So just so much work to be done. We only have a couple minutes left, Tom, and I want to make sure that we hit real quick what solicitations are open right now? In other words, what are, you talked about orbital prime and that one with space junk, if you will, space debris, and the autonomy prime. Are there a couple things out there right now that people can go to and say, hey, maybe that's a good fit for me?
Yeah. So like right now, the biggest open one we have on the SITR side. There's an open solicitation for direct to phase 2 contracts right now. So that's the open topic. So anybody can submit something. So DoD, you can go to AFWERX.com and get directed to the DoD SITR site, which is where you actually go, find the very specific details on that and how to apply. So that's the big one that's open right now. And then we don't have any specific autonomy solicitations out yet. We're looking to do that later on this year when we're kind of ready and have established those pieces. So certainly be on the lookout later on this year for it.
Very cool. Oh, there we go. So there's the QR code, everybody. Take out your cameras now and snap get that going.
Yeah.
So
it's just AFWERX.com. I put that there, but nothing cosmic. So that was great. Like I said, lots of information that we post there, direct focusing information. I'll hit one last question that I just saw pop up in there. Do ideas have to be in relation to new systems, or could they be improvements? 100% they could be improvements. I mean, you look at how we operate within the Air Force, looking for new ways to decrease sustainment costs, or replace systems that are diminishing manufacturing sources that we can't get anymore. Those are also incredibly important areas. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a new system. It can be how do we optimize and save money or do better on our existing systems. We have a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, sustainable fuels is a big area. I think that anybody that's in an airplane is looking at commercial side and the DoD both. Lots of different sustainability goals out there that need to be met. So thank you so much for that question. If you have any more, fire now or forever hold your peace, I guess. Okay, perfect. Robert B says he's got some ideas. So here we go. What's the best way to approach a customer memorandum for D2P2?
Yeah, that's no easy answer to that. So that's part of, I would say, the benefit in kind of coming through the phase one into the phase two is that, part of that is baked into just that customer matching to find those that are out there. What I would say is also don't be shy on that, because they're just like we are trying to educate the industry on this. We certainly have to go educate, Air Force users of, hey, what is this? At the end of the day, what does this customer memorandum mean? What it really means is I want somebody to be, your technical point of contact to be able to, just manage that effort. And at the end of the day, I also want an end user that says, yeah, this is a need that we have. That's what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be something amazing or super cosmic after that. And I think that sometimes we get lost. So if you're finding certainly resistance within the Air Force, also send them back our way, because we can do an internal education piece on that.
All right. Well, very good. You know how to contact Tom after this. He mentioned the word education. So I want to mention an educational event that's coming up at AUVSI Exponential. Military Embedded Systems Magazine is one of our media sponsors. And AFWERX will be participating, talking on a panel about advanced air mobility. There's a separate panel also about government money and how to find it. We've got lawyers, we've got industry, we've got government folks here. So there's the QR code. Go ahead and scan that and register. Early bird actually ends tomorrow. So get it while the getting's good. And we hope to see you there. It's going to be an amazing day. John, thank you so much. Tom, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, John.
Thank you both, guys. That brings us right up to the end of our keynote session, and I will give thumbs up for Dawn's event that's coming up. It's an outstanding event to learn what's going on in the legal world within the autonomous market. And sorry we could not get to all your questions today. Some may get back to you after the event with more information. I want to thank Lt Col Meagher for speaking today, and Dawn Zoldi for hosting the keynote session. This and all Open Systems Media virtual events and webcasts are copyrighted and may not be recorded or used in any way without the express written consent of Open Systems Media. This session and the overall event will be archived online today at the same URL you used to join today's live session, as well as the URL shown on your screen, and be available for at least 1 year. Please be sure to attend our next session, Autonomous ISR Payloads Leveraging AI and Commercial Technology for Actionable Intelligence, starting in just a few moments. Thanks, everybody.